I sold most of my AI stuff when I sold all my crypto stuff.
Google raised $85 billion. Google look at the IPO pipeline, Anthropic, OpenAI coming up, and they're like, let's raise before people are still optimistic.
For the first time in maybe a few decades, the net issuance of equity is larger than sort of buybacks and all these other ways that equity has been retired for the last 20 years. And so I think we're in this scenario where there is a global sucking of capital to AI. Pick somebody in the United States that Trump supported in the past and then turn on them on a dime when it made political sense.
I cannot imagine one day someone says, oh, let's crash the market, and people are happy about that.
I'm seeing all this, and I know it's going to end badly at some point.
There are traders that are trying to front run this passive index buying SpaceX. The date is July 7th.
Index reball is a tough thing because you're playing this reflexive game of, okay, everyone knows the inclusion math, how soon you can make more money on a rebound in certain assets that'll do well when the authorities panic than you can trying to time, the AI bubble. Like, I don't like buying these charts that are just completely vertical because everyone knows that AI is the thing. So obviously that's not the trade that I want to be in. The real story was who sells a picks and shovels to these guys in Taiwan, Korea, Japan. Why would you invest in Bitcoin? The marginal fiat dollar is not going to Bitcoin. Cardano's a piece of trash. Cardano is the definition of a shitcoin that does absolutely nothing, promised the world, and has delivered on zero of it.
Is it easier for Cardano to 10x or AI stock to 10x?
An AI stock. But the amount of capital that will be destroyed will be so big that the money printing that we saw in 2008 will be like a rounding error. What's going to happen with AI? This is the big print. This is what we've been waiting for since COVID. Massive impulse of credit that's going to come and have nowhere to go, but crypto and maybe gold, right? And maybe some energy stocks. And that is going to be the moment where we shine again. Stop fucking worrying about did I get this, little transition in the market right? You got to get the big ones right. I think this is a big one. This is going to be the opportunity of, a generation.
Okay, Arthur Hayes is back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm super excited. He is the co-founder of BitMEX, CIO of Maelstrom, and the only person who can turn a market thesis into a 10,000-word article that crypto community argues about for months and months. Welcome back, Arthur.
Thanks for having me.
In your recent article, The Reality Test, published in June, you were talking about these three main things that could pop the AI bubble. What are they?
So the first thing is oil prices. Due to the U.S. and Iran war, obviously now we're in this sort of ceasefire, memorandum of understanding, peace deal, I don't fucking know. Every day I open the news and something else has happened. And at the end of the day, what are we looking for? What will be the price of oil in sort of a 3 to 6 month time frame? Does a falling price of oil mean that Trump has less pressure to accept a deal? Now, obviously, there was a deal announced, or was it last week or the week before last, this 14-point MOU. And we've already seen Israel, which is supposedly America's ally, vassal state, whatever you want to call them, isn't happy about the deal, and they're restarting their genocide in Lebanon and in Gaza to sort of force the Iranians to say, no, this isn't what we agreed to, let's back out of the deal, because they don't want this deal. They don't want Iran to be reintegrated into the global economy because they see that as a threat to their regional hegemony. So what happens? I don't know. But at the end of the day, obviously oil has fallen a lot. It's down something like $70-ish. The WTI and Brent crude, and people are like, oh yeah, oil inflation's over or whatnot, and so we can all go back and yip hooray back to the AI thing. But I think longer term, there's a very real possibility that as nations sort of rebuild their inventories and people move from a just-in-time to a just-in-case sort of hoarding of industrial commodities, that oil could be markedly higher in 3 to 6 months' time than it is today. And then the question is, for your portfolio, do the things that you own, can they withstand a much higher oil price, especially if we go into the AI field, which AI is literally just converting energy into compute, into intelligence, and doing something useful for human civilization. So I think that's the number one thing. What is the price of oil? What is your view on that? And then it comes down to the politics of AI. And we've already started to see some inklings of what could happen when you have a very politicized build-out of AI, especially in the United States. The ban of the mythos and fable model by President Trump and his Commerce Department unilaterally decided that this model was too dangerous and therefore it should only be used by Americans, even inside of Anthropic. So a foreign person cannot work on this model, even if they work for the company that released it. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. And so that's why they pulled the model almost immediately once the U.S. government launched this concern. And so now you have this issue where essentially you could be a paying member of Anthropic and using their models, and all of a sudden something, you have no control over, Donald Trump and his lieutenants decide that they don't want you using that model, and all of a sudden Anthropic has to comply because they're a US company, and boom, then you're out of luck. And so I think this goes to the open source versus closed source debate. And obviously China is a champion of open source for AI. It's much cheaper. It's pretty much just as good or slightly worse than most of the frontier models. And so if you're a non-American user of AI, you have to think, well, what's the point of actually using a US company's frontier models if I don't even know if I can actually ever use them, day to day? Maybe I should just use the open source model from China, host it on my own machine, have control over all my data, and pay like 1/5, 1/6, 1/10 the cost of what the US models charge. And obviously this is a problem because the valuation for a lot of these companies are based on them charging lots of money and increasing profit margins for these best-in-class models. So again, that's the AI bubble story. When is the AI bubble going to pop? If it does pop, depending on your view on that. And how that relates to crypto is, at the end of the day, I think that for the last, call it 18 months since October 2025, when sort of the AI CapEx spend and debt that's been issued has really ramped up to the hundreds of billions and now trillions of dollars, it's taken all the available marginal capital away from anything else. And so this is why Bitcoin and all the other crypto complexes suffered, because the investor says, okay, well, I have a unit of fiat. I know it's being debased. The AI thing is going up gangbusters. I can trade Kospi and TAIEX and all these, stocks are going nuts. Why would it be in, Bitcoin or Solana or Ethereum when it goes up, 1 or 10%? SK Hynix is up 10x in 1 year, right? So I think this is the whole, zeitgeist of the time. And this is what I was sort of talking about and theorizing, well, what could actually pop this AI bubble? Could the politics bring down AI? Then capital is destroyed. And then you sort of have this period where, at least initially, crypto does very, very badly until, the authorities print some money and then we get back to up only. But who knows when the AI bubble is going to pop? I don't know.
You were talking about November.
I think there's definitely, you have an election coming up, and around election times, people make a lot of choices. So you could see this Trump political, antagonism towards certain types of AI usage morph into, maybe he says, a moratorium on data centers, or at least talks about it, right? Puts the rhetoric out there to gain some votes to help the Republicans win the House and the Senate in the U.S. And regardless of whether or not he actually does it is irrelevant. If the investors have enough belief that he might do it, then you might say, okay, maybe it's time to take some profit. And once that starts happening, then the whole trade sort of collapses upon itself. And then people start asking lots of other uncomfortable questions about the assumptions that underpin their bullish AI thesis.
Are you long AI right now?
No, I sold most of my AI stuff a few weeks ago when I sold all my crypto stuff. So right now I'm just watching, see what happens. Obviously, the SpaceX IPO is going really, really well. Elon continues to become richer and richer and richer. Well, we'll see what happens with Anthropic and OpenAI, or maybe the U.S. government decides that they're going to even get more involved in it by doing what China does, taking equity stakes in these companies, funneling even more debt capital into these things, and then the rally can really continue, right? SpaceX had 100x revenue. Could it be 200x? Of course. If Donald Trump is willing to lend them some more money or buy their equity at the market price, then of course it could go higher.
Google raised $85 billion, which was the largest equity raise in public company in history, right before SpaceX IPO. And people are guessing that, Google look at the IPO pipeline, Anthropic, OpenAI coming up, and they're like, let's raise before people are still optimistic. Do you think there's truth to it?
Absolutely. The amount of capital that's needed to build this CapEx is only going to increase. And so you see Google and all these companies are tapping the debt markets, billions of dollars of debt. Even SpaceX did a $20 billion bond issue, I think, last week. And so now they have the equity option as well. So their free cash flow is declining. Obviously, at some point, you don't want to keep piling on debt. So if the equity markets are very favorable, why not issue equity? And so I think for the first time in maybe a few decades, the net issuance of equity is larger than sort of buybacks and all these other ways that equity has been retired for the last 20 years. And so I think we're in this scenario where there is a global sucking of capital to AI, and they'll do it via debt, they'll do it via equity. And as long as people are willing to buy this stuff, then it's going to continue.
Is that why you're more risk off right now? Because you're seeing all this?
I'm seeing all this, and I know it's going to end badly at some point. I don't know when that is, but at the end of the day, I think you can make more money on a rebound in certain assets that'll do well when the authorities panic than you can trying to time, the AI bubble. Like, I don't like buying these charts that are just completely vertical because everyone knows that AI is the thing. So obviously that's not the trade that I want to be in. It's a momentum trade. I'm not the best momentum trader, so it just doesn't fit with my style.
You can say that after MU like 5x'd, but then there's another 2x after that, right? You don't.
Cool, of course. Yeah, exactly. I think that we're still in the bull market, so I think there's still money to be made on the upside. But I think one of the big things that we don't understand, we don't appreciate is, number one, do these AI companies have pricing power? So if there's a model from DeepSeek or Kimi or one of these Chinese models and it's just as good, it costs 1/10, 1/5 the price of what it costs to produce a token in the West, does the marginal consumer say, oh, okay, if I'm just building some like bullshit travel app or I've got some agents combing my email, do I really need like the best top tier model that costs so much more money from a US lab and probably is harvesting all my data to sell it back to me in some way, shape, or form? Or why don't I just run a much smaller model on my own device or my own network securely, and I pay way less and do this do it the Chinese way, right? And as long as you don't badmouth the Chinese Communist Party, like they don't care what you do on these apps. So I don't think many people care about the politics in China, and the price is right. And we've seen with every other vertical that China has entered, initially people think, oh, the brand of the Western company matters. And then you present the customer with something that's just as good for a much cheaper price. And the customer says, okay, I don't really care about that brand. And we can look at automobiles as a prime example of like, would you rather have the BMW or the BYD? And so I think we already know the answer to that. We've seen BYD and Geely and Xpeng and all these different auto brands completely dominate in countries where they're allowed to sell both types of Western versus Chinese EVs. And the price is right and the quality is there. And so I think the same thing is going to happen with the AI. And that would severely undercut the thesis of why I should pay ridiculous multiples for all these US companies. And then the CapEx spend declines if, the biggest spenders of CapEx are all US companies based on an assumption that, everyone needs to have the best frontier model that's trained on the newest chips from NVIDIA, that needs to have the, 10 gigawatt data center to do all the inference when you could do it much cheaper in China. And I think this is a big problem. We'll see how this sort of plays out. And the other is you're underwriting a lot of debt on a depreciation schedule that doesn't match the reality of silicon hardware. So if I underwrite a GPU chip at 6 years and when the useful life is 2, we're going to see a reckoning come in sort of 2028-ish timeframe on these assumptions on depreciation, unless demand really, really kicks into gear for tokens for these, frontier Western AI models. So again, there's a lot of assumptions in there, and I think over time these will be challenged, and we'll see how the market reacts. I take a bearish view on that, but again, that's just my own point of view.
美国政府在借钱，企业在借钱，房地产在借钱，很多高资产族群其实也不想要轻易卖掉自己的核心资产，尤其是在这种高波动的市场里面，很多人更在意的是，我有没有办法先取得流动性，不是直接把资产卖掉。像是在加密货币市场呢，就很多人选择像是 Nexo 这种借贷平台，把加密货币作为抵押品借贷，最高可以借出资产价值的50%。现在透过下方资讯栏连结加入呢 ，App 打开之后，仪表板上会看到信用中心，点进去之后呢，就可以找到不同的抵押方式，会员的等级越高，利率越好。但是要提醒大家，风险呢，如果没有计算周全，或者是遇到这个资产的大幅下跌，要不然就是遇到平台的风险，还是会面临强制平仓。Nexo 是一家成立于2018年的数位资产管理平台，同时也是奥迪 F1 团队的官方合作伙伴。那 Nexo 除了可以借贷，也可以在上面领取收益。App 的仪表板上面储蓄中心点进去，就可以按照步骤申请质押，持续领取收益。 频道现在的优惠呢，是用专属连结加入的，7天之内只要存入$5000，就可以获得30天 Platinum 会员的资格，得到理财最高15% 的年化收益。当然还有其他的福利，详细资讯呢我会放在资讯栏。So you were talking about AI companies spending a lot of money, right? And those are spending on chips, data centers, employees, and that money actually supports the economy and other businesses. What happens if we slow down the spending?
Well, at least for the United States, it's literally the whole economy. If you take a look at GDP growth in the U.S., it's majority AI tech spend and the derivatives of that. And so that's why, obviously, Trump and the politicians are very in bed with all of these AI companies, and they want them to succeed because the entire economy is based on this. But I think there's some very dubious assumptions that this demand is based on for why you need to build, the next $1 trillion worth of data centers.
But to your point, in that article, you also says Trump could turn against these AI tech bros for political reasons.
At least in the short term, right? I think people say, oh, no, Trump could never do that because he supported him in the past. Pick somebody in the United States that Trump supported in the past and then turn on them on a dime when it made political sense, right? So I think politics is very fickle, and people would be wise to just think about the possibility that Trump could be anti-AI, at least for a few months, to generate some votes.
Do you think being against AI would win votes?
If you read anecdotal stories, there's a lot of people who are upset about data centers and the AI job displacement, right? They're noisy, they pollute the water, they cause inflation. And so there's, certain states are evaluating moratoriums on data center construction. Planning permission is becoming harder, not impossible, harder. So, and on the general zeitgeist of AI, right? Basically, you have all these tech bros saying AI is such a transformative technology. It's literally going to eliminate all these types of drudgery work. But in the future, we're all going to be doing something better than we were doing today. But that's a future. That's many years from now. The here and right now is AI is taking people's jobs, and people are shit scared that, they did this job for however long, and all of a sudden, this AI tool that was launched yesterday now takes their job. And they're not in the SpaceX IPO at the employee price. They're not in, Samsung before it ripped 10x, right? They don't have that much money to invest in the stock market. So they're not really benefiting from all this paper wealth that's being created in this AI stock market boom. So they're like, well, politician, do something about this. Either A, tax these companies, or B, put some sort of regulation so that they can't take my job. So I think you're starting to see certain politicians on the left start to espouse some of these views, like Bernie Sanders in the United States says that the U.S. should take a 50% stake in some of these AI companies. Even Trump himself thinks that the U.S. government should have a stake in these companies. Now, how it's funded, that's the question. But I think on both sides, people recognize that there has to be some compensation for the average person. Otherwise, you're going to have massive social unrest. And so when you start getting into those discussions between capital and labor, when you start from the standpoint of capital having everything, then of course, your market valuation for that company has to decline.
Wouldn't that put Trump in a very strange position? He wants to be the AI and crypto capital of the world, and then hypothetically, he turns against these AI companies. Now, what's the story? Politics, the most successful politicians speak out of both sides of their mouths. And so I think that is the skill. If Trump can do that and thread the needle, and then, he sits down all the AI bros and say, look, I'm going to come after you guys for, 4 or 5 months. Don't sweat it. It's all good. Once, Team Red Republican wins in November, it's back to business as usual. So don't lose your shit. Think about it this way. If I were Trump, that's what I would do. Not to say that he would do that or not do that. I'm just trying to think about, in his position, what are the things that he could do to, win the election? Okay, now let's say that happened and the market sort of crashed. How is that better for his election?
Well, the average person says, oh, fuck these tech guys, right? Trump cares about me, the average worker, right? And so in the United States, it's one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. So yes, the stock market goes down, but the 90% of the American public don't own enough stocks for it to matter. You just have, very vocal, wealthy people who would be impacted by this. But at the end of the day, they aren't the ones who are going to carry you in the election.
So I could be biased because I'm from Taiwan and everyone's just talking about all these AI stocks and everyone seems to make so much money, right?
Exactly.
And
Taiwan, Korea, Japan.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's this.
I cannot imagine one day someone says, "Oh, let's crash the market," and people are happy about that. Yeah.
Exactly. Some people will be, and at least in America.
Do you think the culture is slightly different?
I think that the people that are in our orbit who are all investing in AI stocks are not the median voter who is going to win an election for a politician. And the good politicians recognize that, right? They take money from the rich people and then sort of kind of have to fuck with him a bit to get reelected. And then they continue doing the thing they were going to do anyways. That's politics, at least in the United States, as I have observed. And so I think that this is a winning strategy for Trump or any particular politician.
How does that affect the interest rate then? Because he wants lower rates.
So I particularly think, Kevin Warsh, new chairman of the Fed, he gave his first press conference, and I think that his tell was this whole task force business. So if you go back, he was a Fed governor up until I think 2010 or 2011. He left the Fed because he was upset about this balance sheet expansion for quantitative easing to rebuild the banking system in the United States after the global financial crisis in 2008. And so he left the Fed and he started running, when someone leaves the Fed, then all of a sudden they get their conscience back and they start criticizing all these things, the inequality, the money printing, the inflation, yada, 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 right? All these ways in which the Fed should be doing a better job at price stability. And so he's been saying this stuff for 16 years. And so now he's the big head dog at the Fed now. Now, I'm not saying he has the votes to get through a lot of these things because you need 7 out of 12 to pass anything. But if he's about breaking with the past tradition of money printing towards a new Fed, a new independent Fed that cares about the average person and protecting their currency, their hard work, then at least go out there and state, here's my position on all these issues, balance sheet, this and that. And he could just repeat what he's been saying for the last 16 years. Whether or not it actually happens immediately, that's not the point. At least you put everyone on notice. This is what my organization is about, and I'm going to endeavor to bring about this outcome. Instead, he's launching a task force. And we know what happens with a task force in politics, right? Everyone has to do a task force. And they're going to spend months getting a bipartisan panel of economists and market participants. And they're going to sit around and do fuck all for, 6 or 12 months, produce some report. And then Warsh is going to, I have the task force report. And then they're going to discuss about the task force report. And 2 years later, there will be nothing that has been accomplished. But people say, oh yeah, Warsh cares about, inflation and changing the way the Fed is operating. If he actually cared about it, then state your position clearly at that press conference last week and then do something about it over time instead of you're going to do a task force, which we all know means nothing is going to change. And so I think that the Fed is boxed in a corner. They have to become dovish because of the financial situation of the United States government and this AI boom, right? If you think about AI, the amount of tax dollars generated by OpenAI, SpaceX, and Anthropic in terms of insider selling, they have to pay capital gains, and some states are earning, 10, 15% taxes on top as well. And so you think about it, it's in the government's interest for these IPOs to go very, very well. Do you really want the Federal Reserve tanking the market by jacking up rates to bring in tighten monetary conditions and reduces inflation if it's going to cause literally something that could be 10, 15, 20% of the federal tax bill is literally just people selling their shares on these big AI companies and paying taxes? I don't think so. So I think the Fed always does what's in the best interest of the government, and the best interest of the government is easy monetary policy and supporting this AI bubble.
So you are expecting an easier monetary policy?
I'm expecting the status quo. So right now, the Fed is printing money called reserve management purchases. Another fancy word for quantitative easing, another fancy word for money printing. That's just what they're doing. Their balance sheet is growing, and he didn't stop that. He just held rates. And at least if you follow the economic dogma, the policy rate is whatever, the 2% is their target inflation, and CPI is at what, 4, something like that. I don't know. I think it's a bullshit number anyways, but whatever. It's their bullshit number. So by their bullshit numbers, inflation is too high. So why are you holding rates? You should be raising rates aggressively to rein in inflation. The 10-year yield has risen markedly over the past 18 months. The 10-year yield is telling you, hey, we want higher rates. If you're not going to give higher rates, Fed, then we'll do it for you with market. And so I think, again, if he was really caring about the average American and inflation and price stability, all these things he said for 16 years, when he wasn't the man in charge, you don't do a task force. You state what your position is and how you're going to change the institution. And anyone who's not on board, you're going to find a way to get them out of the picture. That's what you do. But again, he launched a task force. And so I think it's just status quo. The same policies of Jay Powell, of Janet Yellen, of Ben Bernanke, of Alan Greenspan, like all these guys, they're all the same. It's going to continue. Money printing, support the market, support the financial position of the government.
And do you think that money printing is going to be more aggressive because, well, Trump kind of appointed, or like Trump wanted him to be the chair, right?
Right now the policy is perfect, right? AI is pumping. SpaceX is, what is it, fourth largest company in the world, with like losing however many billions of dollars a year, trading at like some ridiculous like price to revenue multiple. That just tells you that monetary policy is too easy. If you're able to believe all the things that Elon is selling you in that S1, monetary policy is too easy. Money is too loose. The Fed should do something about that. And they're not. Just by holding it steady, they're continuing the Ponzi scheme, which is fine. That's what they're there to do. And so I think he doesn't have to do anything. Just leaving the dials of where they are is perfectly enough juice for the AI bubble to continue.
The SpaceX IPO, low float, high FDV. We're very familiar with that in crypto.
Yes.
What is your thought on this?
I mean, he's engineered everything perfectly to make this thing go up. You only float 4% of the stock. You change the index rules, or get them to change the index rules so that this is included in all the major indices. So you have passive money flowing into this. Maybe the U.S. government's going to invest in this thing to give the American people an opportunity to own this highly overvalued company. Okay, cool. Reddit. He's doing all the things, right? Ticking all the boxes, just like any crypto degen Muppet would do with their piece of shit shitcoin that they want to flog off to the public. Elon is doing it. And we know, once the insiders start selling, which they will, right? Because you have some people who've really generational wealth created on paper. Of course, you're going to take some shift off the table when your shares unlock. Can the stock continue to rally when, you go from 4% float to 30% float by, in October of this year? Crypto tells you usually that marks the top of a particular market. We'll see. I don't think it really particularly matters for the general AI consensus, because as long as SpaceX is around these valuation levels, that just gives signals that, okay, the game is still on. We can still sell all this future revenue and book it today, and people are willing to pay for that, pay a multiple for that. So even if the stock stalls, it's still bullish for the market because it's, $2+ trillion valuation on no profitability.
There are traders that are trying to front run this passive index buying SpaceX. I think the date is July 7th. This is the day when all the indexes would start buying. Do you think that's a smart strategy?
Index reball is a tough thing because you're playing this reflexive game of, okay, everyone knows the inclusion math. How soon do you start pre-positioning? Or do you take the opposite view that there's too much money going into the index inclusion, and then the amount of money disappoints and then people swing the other way? So I've never been a rebell trader. There's lots of philosophies on how you sort of position yourselves. So I don't know. I can't really speak to that.
Would you ever buy SpaceX?
No, not at this valuation. Maybe if the thing crashed 99% and, it looked like
99? 99?
I want an Amazon situation. I want, I want the thing to go down 99, 95%. And then, Starlink, great business, profitable, right? XAI could be profitable. Absolutely. Mining in space does not make sense today because it's probably like 4 times more expensive than a terrestrial data center, but it will make sense at some point in the future. I don't know, maybe 5-10 years from now, but do I want to pay a multiple at this level for that future? No, I don't want to pay that multiple. But maybe if the stock was down 99%, I'd be willing to pay that multiple on a data center in space future. So I think that's just me. And I'm not mentally primed to participate in this kind of stock price mania, if you want to call it that.
Let's talk about Bitcoin, because a huge amount of capital has gone into AI-related stocks and debt. That roughly matches the increase in dollar M2, right? But then
that's what I put in my essay.
Yeah, and you're saying that is the reason why Bitcoin is not going up, even with money printing.
Yes, because the money is gone in like if you have a unit of fiat, what are you doing? What are you doing in Taiwan, right? You're trading fucking TSMC, Compaq, like all the names. You're fucking going nuts. Just let me see the supply chain. It's the same trade that we used to do with the Apple. Every time Apple would come up with shipments, we'd be all in all these names. They're all the same names. And now, because they sell the similar components, now they're into the AI trade, and we're all trading these Taiwanese names up and down. It's the same thing.
I was talking to my friends in San Francisco who lives very close to these AI companies, and they're saying a house would list for $2 million and sell for 4.5 because there's just so much cash in that area and industry. So, I'm wondering does that AI wealth rotate into Bitcoin somehow at some point?
I don't think so. I think because Bitcoin has not performed, and these people are going to buy hard assets, right? They're going to buy the house. Mm-hmm. They're going to buy the car. They're going to buy the expensive watch. They're going to travel first class or buy the plane. Like all these sorts of things that folks do when they've generated a massive amount of wealth very quickly. I don't think they're going to go into Bitcoin just because, it hasn't really performed. I thought it was supposed to be this inflation protecting store of wealth, all the narratives that we talk about with why you should own Bitcoin. I should have just bought NASDAQ. Maybe I'll just buy somewhere NASDAQ. Okay, maybe I'll sell my stake in this one company. Let me diversify by owning a basket of other up and coming tech companies. Because I believe, obviously, you intrinsically believe in the story of AI. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been doing this for so long when it wasn't the hottest trade on the street. So I don't see this money rotating into crypto until the entire AI story collapses on itself.
So if AI stocks go down, we see that crypto and Bitcoin also goes down. So
yes, everything goes down together. Correlation one, at least in the beginning, right? Because these assets are all connected. Investors sell what you can, not what you want, right? Bitcoin is a liquid asset, trades 24/7. If you've got to generate cash for margin calls and all sorts of other spending, right? You just sell everything as quickly as you can, right? And that's why things move in a correlation one moment in the first, at least initial part of the downdraft, and then you start to sort out, the relative winners and how you think the rebound is going to happen.
If you have to take a wild guess, when does the AI bubble pop?
I think that I think the prime date would be sometime in 2028. And I say that because if you think about when the majority of this new wave of debt was originated, you call it starting in 2024, late 2024, 2025, 2026. And essentially we're underwriting, number one, a GPU with a useful life of 2 years, but we're giving it a 6-year depreciation schedule. Like the chickens come home to roost in about 2.5 years, right? In 2028, roughly time frame. You start to see, is that demand there? Did that H100 chip or that Blackwell chip that I underwrote at 2024, 2025, is that still relevant for me to generate enough revenue? And is that revenue even more depressed by the fact that there's a Chinese model that's just as good, maybe that's on a Huawei chip, and it's 1/10 the price? And so the entire economics of why I should build a Western data center at this price evaporate. That is the math. So that math is going to collide with demand. So either demand is so ridiculous and we're all wrong, like, agents and companies and productivity and whatever, right? There's so much demand, it sort of dwarfs all these negative things that could happen, or it's as we expect and people prefer the cheaper, just as good product. And this chip that you bought 2 years ago is now obsolete because you need to buy the new chip to get the best inference per, kilowatt hour and all these sorts of things, right? So these are the things, and that I think that crucible happens in 2028, whether or not we go either way.
What would you pay attention to make sure that your thesis is still right? Because headlines changes very quickly, right?
The acceleration or deceleration of AI CapEx spend. So if we want this bull market to continue, we want the amount of CapEx spend to accelerate. So, let's call it 2026 estimate over 2025 is like double, something like that. So we needed at least a doubling to meet our forecasts of 2027 to 2026. Now, even if it goes up in 2027, that's not the point. You can't invest in a chart that goes up like that if you're not accelerating the amount of spend on this capex. So a deceleration in AI capex is market negative for the trend, even if, yes, their earnings are going to be positive for a lot of these companies, but you paid some ridiculous multiple. So you need accelerating earnings to justify an even higher price for what you paid for in the past.
Since you mentioned 2028, that is the next halving. Is that how the story continues? So
no, I don't. I don't care about Bitcoin halvings or like.
No,
I think it's
no. Okay,
no.
This is interesting because last time we talked, it was October last year, and that was the peak. We were talking about how 4-year cycle is dead, but now looking back, is it really dead?
I think it's just coincidence. I don't like to use it has to be invested in a 4-year cycle because if you bet the time. There's one time or 2 times you're going to be wrong on that. You've just bet your entire farm on it has to be the 4-year cycle. I picked out the date. That's the date. Like, you can't be so exact on things, right? Things change. It's fluid. It's a cycle. I just don't like to be so exact on anything. This is why I don't like the 4-year cycle. It might be correct in your back-tested past, but the future does not necessarily have to conform to that. And you don't want to be pigeonholing your investment strategy based on what's happened in the past. You want to be informed to what happened in the past and use your judgment to see how things might change in the future based on the current circumstances.
I want to ask you another question based on the past. So back to the 4-year cycle. This is data from the past, not the future, but the first halving, we were up 92x and then 30x, 8x. This cycle, about 2x. Now, if, I don't know, Micron can go up like 7x, why would I even hold Bitcoin?
Correct. I mean, and that's why that is the AI trade. This is the largest build out of capex ever in human history, larger than the railroads as a percentage of global GDP. Of course, the people who sell the picks and shovels, the Microns, the DRAM memory providers, right? This is basically Samsung, SK Hynix. This is why these stocks have just mooned recently, right? I sell the picks and shovels. I sell the energy. I sell the transformers. I sell whatever I sell, right? I sell to these data centers. Like, that's the trade. It's not going along, the hyperscalers. Yeah, you've made some money. But the real story was who sells the picks and shovels to these guys? In Taiwan, Korea, Japan, right? These are the real stories of this AI bull market, which is why everyone in these markets is, Kospi was the best performing market last year. Like, the Kospi has higher realized volatility than it did during the global financial crisis. Like, and this is upside volatility on Kospi. It's absolutely insane. And so this is the story. And so that's why, why the fuck would I invest in Bitcoin or Ethereum? Like, I should just find some like no-name AI component manufacturer in Taiwan, Korea, or Japan, and my stocks, in 3 months, I'll be up 10x. I mean, that's how people are thinking. And they're not wrong based on the past, right?
But what about future going forward? Are they still right?
Again, but you're assuming that, number one, these guys continue to spend at an aggressive pace, and that the demand for their tokens continues to increase such that it negates all these sort of the negative ways in which they underwrote the economics of a chip. And so that is the question.
Is it a better time to buy Bitcoin now because it's so oversold?
I don't know about that. I own Bitcoin. I'm long. I've been long for a very long time. And so it goes up, it goes down. I think, again, if you had a unit of fiat capital and you are, an avid trader looking at your screen all day, I couldn't in good conscience say, oh yeah, you need to own Bitcoin. Yeah, go trade the AI thing. If you're like on it, right? Like live and breathe in AI, live and breathe the CapEx numbers, the news cycle, and understand these trends, and you believe that you're going to be able to get off the train before everyone else, before the thing collapses upon itself, then why would you invest in Bitcoin? I don't see the money, the marginal fiat dollar is not going to Bitcoin. It's going to the debt issuance of the hyperscaler. It's going to the equity issuance of the hyperscaler. And at the government level, they're going to be pushing their central banks and their treasury departments to fund AI for national security, to build more drones, to, all the things in which why a politician is for AI is only going to intensify.
You also recently sold a lot of altcoins, Zcash, Near WorldCoin, Hyperliquid. What changed?
So I became more bearish on this AI story. I had a good run, so I was up a lot in terms of, profitability. And so I said, okay, let me take some chips off the table. These trades have become almost consensus. If people are picking up my holy trinity and saying, oh yeah, that's the only thing that I need to own, okay, that doesn't mean that these things won't continue to go up, but the asymmetry in the trade has diminished. And so, okay, well, I don't want to, again, I'm not staring at my screen all day. I'm not monitoring every particular news cycle and can time the top and pick the bottom. So, I did well. I created a narrative. I, pumped my narrative. People believed it. They made some money too. I made some money. I'm going to step back and, try to reevaluate and find a symmetry somewhere else in the investing landscape.
Have you found it?
I have. I think we have, there's a coin called Cards, the collectible trading card ecosystem, if you want to call it that. It's a very small market cap coin at this point, but they generate a lot of revenue. And the problem has been previously, and this is something I harp on a lot about, protocol generated revenue. There's no path to that revenue going to token holders. But we've done some research, and we believe that the team behind the Cards coin has started to do buybacks with their revenue. And we believe that the trading card narrative is just in the beginnings of doing a run, and this could do very, very well.
Earlier, you talked about Ethereum, Solana, and I want to add in Cardano because there are a lot of people holding these big cap. What is your thought on these? Projects or tokens or whatever you call it?
Cardano should not be included in those three. Cardano's a piece of trash. Like they've done nothing. And yes, the best thing they did was good tokenomics in the beginning and giving away a lot of tokens. And it's been around for a long time, so it's gone up a lot in price, so people like it. But when smart contracts, never going to happen, right? Like what actual development has happened on this chain? It's a zero. So Ethereum and Solana, different stories. There's actually things going on these networks. The question for Solana is, do they have another meme coin-like narrative that's going to generate a lot of transaction fees or transactions on chain, or the perception that those transactions will increase in the future? That's what Solana needs to get out of its funk. Maybe the trading cards narrative will do that. I'm not sure. And then Ethereum obviously has not performed very well over the last, since the 2021 peak. They have some, interesting economics between the L2s and the L1s that needs to be sorted out. Why do you need to own the main chain versus the L2s? I think that's the question for Ethereum, and we'll see if they sort it out.
Okay, if you're still holding these bags, would you sell it now?
Would I sell it now? Depends on what your opportunity cost of capital is, right? So if you don't need the money,
down a lot.
Yeah, but again, everything is relative, right? So if you don't need the money, do you care if the thing is down 50%? If you believe that in some particular period of time, it's going to go up another 10x. But if you say, oh, well, I bought this trade to do this thing and it didn't happen, okay, then you exit the trade and you take that capital and you redeploy it in something else. Or maybe it's AI or whatever it is that you think that you'll generate a better return for your capital.
Is it easier for Cardano to 10x or AI stock to 10x?
An AI stock. Absolutely. An AI stock actually has some fundamentals. Cardano has proven Cardano has had a chance to provide fundamentals. It has done nothing. At least SK Hynix generates revenue and profitability. Now, whether or not you want to pay the multiple for that is the question. But these are very profitable companies who've been around for a very long time. Cardano is the definition of a shitcoin that does absolutely nothing, promised the world, and has delivered on zero of it.
Would you sell Ethereum and then bet on AI stock?
Again, it depends on what your goal is.
Would you personally?
Would I? No, I have Ethereum. I haven't sold. Still have a bag of Ethereum. Am I selling it to buy AI stocks? No, but I have spare capital. So I wanted to buy an AI stock. I don't need to fund it by selling Ethereum. So again, everyone is in a different situation. And so I think that is why people need to do their own research and consider their own situation before they follow anyone's, I don't give advice, obviously, but anyone's musings on social media or these podcasts.
Can you explain to me why Cardano is so popular?
Because I think a lot of people vested earlier, and yes, it's up. It's still, what is it, top 10? I don't know what this market cap is.
I think it's dropped out at top 10.
But it's still top 20, right? It's called top 20.
Yeah.
Is that right? And so from 0 to top 20, right? That's a lot of wealth creation, right? And so of course people are going to like Cardano. Oh, it did something for me. It went up in price. Again, this is what I tell founders, right? You could have the best, baddest ass tech and all the, pedigree, credentialed developers and build this really cool thing and do not give your token holders a way to make money and you go nowhere, even if you have real usability. Or you can be like Cardano or Ripple and do absolutely nothing, lie to your people that you're going to do something about it. However, people got this thing really, really cheap. You allowed them to get rich with you, Garlinghouse and Hodgkinson. The people got rich with you, and so they're going to support you. And this is why the price is so important. It's more important than the fundamentals of what you've actually built. Because if you give the majority of the community a way to participate in what you are building, and they get wealthy alongside the founders of the project, then they will be with you forever, regardless of what you do. And so this is why Cardano will be, in 15 years, probably still be in the top 50 coin. Even, continue to do nothing. Because people made money along the way, and they're going to continue to support it.
It's number 19 right now. It's still top 20, but it dropped a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what would happen for you to start buying these coins again?
Which coins?
Crypto. Now, since we have 24-hour tokenized stocks trading on various exchanges, people are like, I can trade, I don't know, TSMC like an altcoin. Why do I need to trade altcoins?
I think that crypto is going to find its groove again when the AI bubble collapses. And I think that the AI bubble, given the amount of capital and what I considered misallocation that is happening, obviously the market thinks I'm wrong at this point, will be bigger than subprime. And there's credit time bombs ticking in the global financial system with the way in which this credit is being underwritten on the assumption that I can take a chip that depreciates within 2 years, but I'll give it a 6-year depreciation schedule or underwrite it for a 6-year loan. I will bet on the fact that people care about the brand of the AI company, i.e. the US brand, more than they care about cost, which has never been the case for any particular vertical that China has entered, right? These are the two assumptions that underpin, at least in my opinion, the AI bull market. I think these will be proven wrong by 2028. And I think the amount of capital that will be destroyed will be so big that the money printing that we saw in 2008 will be like a rounding error for what's going to happen and what's going to happen with AI. And so because, unfortunately, central banks cannot fix Moore's Law and the depreciation schedule of silicon chips, they're going to print. These companies are not going to respond. The banks that underwrite these, they're fucked. And Bitcoin and crypto, there's all this capital. It can't go back in AI because everyone's like, why would I buy a Western AI company when the Chinese one is just as good and 1/10 the price? Why would I buy a loan when the underlying economics are just fucked, right? I have a 2-year chip that goes to 0 versus 6 years on this loan. Like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. No. I don't want anything to do with that. Well, I got this free money because they just kept printing it. What do? I buy Bitcoin. And I think this is the big print. This is what we've been waiting for since COVID. That massive impulse of credit that's going to come and have nowhere to go but crypto and maybe gold, right? And maybe some energy stocks. And that is going to be the moment where we shine again. And, Bitcoin could go up 10, 20x in value because there is, the printed money cannot go back to where it was before because people have learned and they need to adjust. So I think that is when we get our, next massive bull market. Again, I don't know when that's going to happen, but I want to be mentally prepared. That's my mental model. Like, I need to get that transition from AI to money printing back to crypto. If you can hit that right, you can get everything wrong between now and then and afterwards, right? It doesn't matter. If you got COVID Bitcoin, right, or Ethereum or something that's going, does it matter that you got everything else wrong? Doesn't fucking matter. You made so much money, right? It doesn't matter. So like, stop fucking worrying about like, did I get this, little transition in the market right? You got to get the big ones right. I think this is a big one. AI collapse, money printing, crypto boom. That's my mental model. When it happens, I don't know, but I want to be ready and have dry capital ready to allocate to crypto when that happens, because I think this is going to be the opportunity of a generation in terms of you wanted to go long the S&P in March 2009 at 666, right? You're up 10x on the biggest stock market in the world. Right, you wanted to go long Citibank at $1. Right, these are the things you wanted to do out of the crisis. Because are they going to let these things fail? And think about all the debt, the companies that are underwriting all the. Are they going to let J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and BBVA, like all these fucking banks who are underwriting? They're not going to let them fail. Of course not. Right, but you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Think, oh look at the crypto exposure, the AI exposure of this bank or this financial institution, and I don't want to own any of that. Sure, okay, I get it, but like. Guess what the government's going to do? They're going to fucking bail them out. And so, like, there's going to be a generational money-making opportunity at the turn, and that's what you have to get right. And again, nothing else matters if you do that right. And so that's what I'm focused on and trying to update my mental model as we go to think about that. And hopefully that is the case of what happens. And if I'm wrong, well, let me make sure that I understand what has changed to alter that particular worldview.
I love that. And thank you for that. I think that's very inspirational for a lot of young people. Now, the last question before we wrap this up. According to King's College study, about 70% of people are worried about AI job losses. And you've personally lived through a major career disruption yourself. Before BitMax, you were laid off from Citibank. Wasn't that the greatest thing that happened to you?
Absolutely, it was the greatest thing that happened to me. But again, I didn't have any debt, I didn't have a family. Like, there's a lot of things that were going for me. So like, okay, I lost my job. Who gives a fuck, right? I can be poor. I don't really have any other. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people need to believe in themselves. Like, I see a lot of people on social media like, oh, I didn't invest in SpaceX at this valuation. I should have done this. Yeah. I did something else. But at the end of the day, like, whatever you do, you should always bet on yourself, because you have complete control over what you can do with your own mind and your own effort and make your own way. You can't control what someone else does. And so if you have the opportunity to bet on yourself with a lot of these new tools that allow us to express ourselves economically in much more impactful ways, then I think there's a massive opportunity for those who want to take it.
What should they focus their time on over the next, let's say, 5 years?
I have no idea. Whatever you enjoy doing, like I couldn't give you if you don't enjoy, like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you don't enjoy what you're doing, then like, what's the fucking point? So I think everyone's different.
There's love.
No like, yes, but like, that's a bit trite because obviously you have bills to pay and whatnot. But again, like, if you're able to solve the basic needs of human existence, and now you have these tools that allow you to have a much more impactful economic footprint using cheap AI, right? You can do so many more things that you couldn't do 10 years ago, even with the internet, that you can do now as an entrepreneur with an idea and some grit and determination, right? You can do a lot more. That's not to say that this job displacement should be like dismissed. This is a real thing. Most entrepreneurship is not for everyone, right? Some people just want to work a job, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think understand your own psychological makeup of what makes sense for you. But there is a massive amount of opportunity for a few people.
Arthur, thank you. This is amazing, and it's always fun to have you on. Let's do this in a couple months, and let's do this in a couple months. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is this reality or is this a test?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time.